This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under-18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 511 for March 30th, 2017. Coming up on today's show. My metamour wants me to be out of the closet. That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Mink. Sitting in the co-host chair today is...
Lusty Guy. Happy to be here once again.
We have an interesting topic today, listener-driven question today, but there are just a few announcements before we dive into our main topic. The first one, we haven't mentioned this in a couple episodes, is that we have a new ebook out that we came out with just a few months ago called No Dick Pics, Your Guide to Creating an Irresistible Online Dating Profile. So if you're not getting the results that you want out of OkCupid or FetLife, then it's just $4.99. Download the ebook. We take you step by step through the process of creating a fantastically successful, fully optimized online dating profile.
Boy, she had that worked out. All I can say is go buy the book.
And also, we mentioned this briefly last week, but podcasters around the world are participating in the Tripod campaign, which is a campaign to encourage people who listen to podcasts to post about it publicly using the hashtag Trypod, Trypod, as in try a podcast, with a list of whatever podcast that you listen to, or it can be a singular podcast. I did it on Twitter, and I also made a few entries on Facebook as well. I have several sex-positive podcasts that I listen to that I posted on Facebook, but then I also have some non-sexy podcasts, like, I, for example, listen to the Grammar Girl podcast, which I love. I listen to a lot of NPR podcasts like This American Life and Radiolab, and then also Escape Pod science fiction short stories. So if you listen to other podcasts, by all means, please use the hashtag Tripod and tell everyone on social media what you're listening to. And, if you happen to mention that you listen to Polyweekly, we would be ever so grateful.
And by the way, thank you so much for explaining where the tripod thing came from. Because, I was totally confused.
You were thinking about a guy with a big dick, right?
No, well, maybe a little bit. But mostly I was thinking a camera tripod, a tripod. Yeah. I was like, I don't get it. But now I do. Thank you.
I didn't, when I first heard it, of course, because people talk about on podcasts, and when you can't see it spelled Try pod, it is kind of weird when you hear it orally.
I'm not touching that one. And while we're doing host announcements, let's mention once again that I have a cross-country road trip coming up in May. I'm going to be going down to Texas to go boar hunting. I'm very excited about that. And I'm going to be driving from Seattle to roughly Boise down to Albuquerque, and Albuquerque over to Dallas. And along the way, Minx and I were thinking about it, and we thought, hey, you know what? We get a lot of letters that come in from people who are poly in the more rural areas of the country, talking about how that's a different experience. So if you happen to live on that route and you'd be willing to have me stop by for an hour or so with a microphone and talk about your poly story and what it's like being poly where you live, drop me an email at lustyguy@polyweekly.com, and we'll set up a time when I could stop by and interview you and include you in a future show. Poly in the Heartland, we're calling it.
Your poly origin story.
Indeed.
Our topic this week is a listener who wrote in saying that their metamour wants them to come out publicly, but the letter writer for various reasons, feels the need to be more closeted. And how do you deal with this? Would you like to summarize it, Lusty Guy?
I think you just did a great summary of the point, right? That's the meta issue right there. But let's go ahead and take a look at the letter that was written in and kind of parse out some details. First, some quick background. The letter writer is M, with pronoun she, Partner is D, pronoun he, and metamour is N, pronoun she. And by the way, thank you. Thank you for including the preferred pronouns. Now, M considers herself monogamous, and her partner D considers himself polyamorous. They've been together for like 9 years, most of which they were monogamous, but after a year or so of talking and thinking about it, they decided to go ahead and become polyamorous. And about 2 years ago, it looks like. Then they met N. N is somebody who's local to them. It looks like in the beginning there was some lying and cheating that happened, the details of which don't really come through in this letter, although our writer does say that she's trying to move forward in a positive way despite still being hurt with it. N is monogamous with D.
Ah, okay.
So not seeing anybody else. And M, interestingly, writes, N is monogamous with my partner, but yet loves to claim she's poly. Sorry, didn't mean to be judgmental. We'll come back to that. I think there's an important thing there in that.
Yes.
The partner is the one driving this. The partner, specifically N, is the one driving this desire to be publicly out. N wants to be able to post in social media and wants to be able to be seen as being in a relationship with
the husband
with
D.
the husband D.
Right.
And she is upset with M, our writer, because she believes that M is the one that is holding things up, that M is the source of the no. Now, D and M are out to their closest friends, and N is out with D in social settings that involve only their closest friends. It's just the public outness that isn't there yet.
Can't post can't change your relationship status on Facebook.
Exactly.
Right.
M says that N thinks that M is trying to hold on to her status as being in a traditional monogamous couple and does not want to fully acknowledge him as her girlfriend. And what do? As she sums up, she says that N blames me. Clearly, we have a hot mess of a situation. Yeah, kind of do, as a matter of fact.
No argument here.
She's also kind of curious about what term might be used to apply to somebody who is monogamous but in a relationship with someone who's poly. And that's kind of, there's most of the details. So you want to take the first whack at the piñata?
The first whack at the piñata. Well, I'll answer the easy one first, which is the phrase that is usually used to describe that type of relationship is monopoly. When you have a couple that is together and one person self-identifies as monogamous and the other person self-identifies as poly, whether that person is actually practicing poly or not at any particular time. That's the phrase typically used to describe that type of relationship. That's the easy one. The other whack at the piñata. So it seems like our letter writer M's biggest concern is that she's being perceived as the bad guy. Here's my take on this. Having been in N's position where I was coming into an existing relationship and for various reasons, at least for the first 6 months of my dating someone else's husband, we were not able to be out about it. Couldn't post on Facebook, but also in public. Like literally, it was a smaller town. And so when we were out at a coffee shop that was close to their house, I couldn't hold his hand. I couldn't have any public displays of affection. Now, it was my first poly relationship, and I was madly in love with him, so I was willing to do that. Happily, for me, things changed within 6 months or so when we realized we were desperately in love. And we also realized that it was very unfair to me to have to be closeted. I mean, let's face it, the closet is generally toxic. It leads to feelings of shame, despite, even when there is no intent to be that way. So I would just like to at first express some empathy for N, because it does suck to have a relationship and not have it acknowledged publicly. I mean, whether or not you're posting on Facebook, but it's just a very uncomfortable position to be in. Now, add to that the fact that N apparently self-identifies as monogamous as opposed to poly, and that makes it even more difficult, I think, because most monogamous relationships, there is no need to hide anything because it's fully accepted by society. So that makes it even more difficult, I think, for N. That being said, I'm a big believer that the only person who gets to decide if you're out of the closet is you.
Everybody's closet is their own.
It is ultimately your decision whether or not you are in or out of the closet. There may be many other reasons. There are repercussions with jobs. Poly's not a protected status. You can be fired for being poly. There are repercussions with kids, as we learned in last week's episode, in terms of court cases. You can have your kids taken away from you for being poly if you have a judge that is not quite as understanding as the one that we mentioned in episode 510 in that particular court case. For these reasons, being out is a personal decision. That being said, we do because the closet is toxic, we do encourage people, if it's humanly possible for you to be out, it's probably going to generally be healthier for you and for the people you date to be out. And I have one other thought, but I want to hand it over to you because I think you have... I haven't dealt with the really tricky part yet.
Well, there's a number of tricky parts here. Normally, what I'll do in this situation is not answer the question that the letter writer is asking until the end, and I'll address the tricky parts that I think I see first. But I'm going to do this the other way here. This is a situation that is really hard if you are stuck with the obvious principle to apply that everybody's closet is their own. Mm-hmm. Because in preserving M's closet, N is forced into a closet.
That non-consensually, basically.
Right. And so that answer is not satisfactory. What you basically got is an immutable force meeting an immovable object.
Ooh, physics nerd.
Well, the classic can God make a rock so heavy he can't lift it? And it doesn't get you anywhere when you think about it that way. Here's the way to think about it that gets you somewhere. For a group to stay together, that group has to move at the pace of its slowest members. By definition, if members of the group try to move faster than the slowest members are able to move, you'll leave those members of the group behind and the group won't stay together anymore. So what that means is that's the principle that applies here. Not that everybody's closet is its own, but that if the group wants to stay together, it has to move at the slowest pace of its treasured member. In this case, and there's no value judgment on slow, by the way. In this case, that's you. You are the one that is moving at this pace for coming out of the closet, and if the group wants to stay together, it's got to move at your pace. Now, we get to the interesting thing from my perspective. What I'm seeing in your letter is not a group that wants to stick together. What I'm seeing in your letter is a whole bunch of undiscussed, fed up, and frustration and blame game going on. People ascribing motivations, people who think they know what's going on inside of somebody else's head, people who aren't letting everybody be the expert on them. And I see that all over. For example, in your statement when you say that N is monogamous with my partner but yet loves to claim she's poly. Well, in my world, even if I'm not sleeping with somebody else, even if I only have one partner I'm having sex with, but I want to, or I'm open to, or I don't feel like I have to stay with that one person exclusively at that one time, I'm polyamorous.
And this is where I raise my hand and say, I'm only with one partner. I'm only with Lusty Guy, and have been for many years, quite happily so. And I happily self-identify as poly. I could be with somebody else. Don't particularly want to be now. That has been different in the past, maybe different in the future, but for the last, 5 years, I haven't dated anybody else. I'm just with you, and I'm definitely happily self-identified as poly.
And let me say, it is not something that I just see that you're doing, Em. For example, when you say, she thinks that I'm trying to hold on to my status. Well, that's her not letting you be the expert on you and wondering about your motivations and what's going on in your head. What I see right here are people that are not invested in keeping the group together, but instead are competitively trying to assign identities and assign thoughts and motivations to each other all across the board. And again, I hope you don't hear that I'm jumping on you, because I'm not. It totally makes sense why you would be in that situation. As you say, things started out dishonestly, and you're still trying to address that.
Well, and also this poly wasn't your idea.
That's right.
It's really tough to embrace a lifestyle that wasn't your idea, and it's very easy to see threats everywhere, especially when it sounds like you're trying to embrace a partner who is not experienced at poly.
That's right. So what I would say is that all of you right now are trying to answer questions that you haven't built the tool set yet to answer. You haven't yet got so that you really believe that everybody is looking out for each other's well-being, so that everybody really is trying to craft solutions together rather than competitively. You're not able to let everybody be the expert on themselves. Everyone is trying to assign inner motivations to each other. And then your husband doesn't seem to participate much at all in that, like you say, he's putting his head in the sand and just wants things to be nice. As long as those things are true, you're not going to be able to craft solutions that work for all of you. You're trying to craft a solution to a problem right now, but you're not going to be able to do so until you start being able to be sure that everybody's got everyone's best interest at heart, that there's always displays of goodwill, that you're letting everybody be the expert on themselves, that you're talking about behavior and not projections of thoughts and feelings, stuff like that. So in answer to your direct question, yeah, your closet is your own, and if this group wants to stay together, it has to move at the pace of the slowest member, the person who is least willing and able to come out. And that should be accepted with goodwill around, even though it's hard to be in the closet when you don't want to be. I've been in that same situation. I've had a lover who would not introduce me to her twin sister. It was really hard. I get it. At the same time, just like with sexual behavior, if you want to stay together, sexual safety behavior, if you want to stay together, you got to move at the pace of the slowest member of the group. Now, I would suggest you, based on reading your letter, I'm not sure how much the group here wants to stay together. And you guys got to work at that level and say, all right, if we want to work together, then we got to start building some of these skills and tools so that we can actually find conflict resolution. I'm not sure you're there right now, and I think you need to go down and build your foundation before you start trying to erect your structure.
I love having you as co-host because that is a much more elegant way of saying the second thing that I wanted to say, which is basically that there is not yet a basis for trusting communication in this group, and you guys need to fucking talk to each other.
Yeah.
I'm hearing the same thing that Lusty Guy is, that there's a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of assigning of motives. You're kind of guessing at why she's acting, the way she's acting. She's doing the same to you. And really, with polyamory, there is absolutely no substitute. You have to establish a line of communication with N. You need to make sure that you and she are comfortable talking about things together and that you trust each other and that you do the work to understand each other's motives and desires and intentions. And then the same thing with your husband. He does not get to bury his head in the sand. Fuck that shit. It will not work if somebody's burying their head in the sand. He has to be a willing and active participant. And then also, in addition to opening those lines of communication with you and N and with you and your husband, you also need to be able to communicate the three of you together in one manner or another. Polyamory is difficult, as you have seen, especially if you don't self-identify as poly, because that means that traditionally you don't always, you're basically doing all the work without necessarily getting all the benefits of poly. And that can be really tough. That can be a lot to ask of a partner. If you want to stay together, and if you want this to work, as Lusty Guy said, you guys are going to have to sit down and be open and honest with yourselves and with each other. And at the risk of sounding really silly, might want to invest in the Kicking Polydrama on Its Ass online course together. We actually have a membership that can be used by up to 3 people, so you can take the whole thing together at once and work through it. There are a lot of things that I see you need to talk about that are going to be tough. But in the absence of that, at the very least, you guys need to start buying some poly books, reading them together, talking about them together. At the very least, you need to fucking talk to each other and start being honest with yourself and each other so that you can have some loving and compassionate conversations.
Yeah. In essence, you guys have jumped into the deep end and are wondering why you're floundering. I can tell you, okay, here's the answer to your question about being in the deep end, but what you really need to do is wander over into the shallow area, put your feet down, and work on some breaststrokes. Grab a hold of the side of the pool, lift your feet up, and kick a little bit with your head above the water. Start down with those basic things, which, we've said a couple of times here. Start with those basic communication techniques, and that will help you build up to a place where you can find answers that will work for everybody. Yeah,
the problem is not... The problem really isn't about coming out. The problem is that you guys don't have the communication set, don't have the mutual respect and trust yet. So that the problem, if it weren't coming out, it would be something else.
Yep.
And that's going to continue to come up until you get your good, strong, foundation of communication in place. We've stepped on this landmine before many times. That's why.
And, kudos to you for writing the letter and thinking and trying. And you mentioned how you're trying to own your poo. You're open with having some nursing or some lingering resentments and things. And that's totally reasonable that you do. So please don't hear this as an attack on you. It's really not. It is, in fact, a loving suggestion to establish the foundation before you try to build the structure.
Yeah, because we want you to have a good poly relationship. We want you to have a happy and healthy relationship of any kind. Our first bit of feedback this week is from Alan, who said, I also wanted to add to your mounting evidence that it is more often the woman who suggests moving to poly from a monogamous marriage or relationship. My wife has recently requested that I accept her having an ongoing romantic relationship with a former college boyfriend while we continue to maintain the good marriage and family life that we have together. She says he brings value and happiness to her life in ways different than what I do, and that she wants to be clear that she wants him to be in addition to and not take anything away from our relationship, and also that she doesn't want to cheat on me. And he does say that he'd considered poly before, read Heinlein, but had decided, frankly, that it wasn't for him. He continues, and she still has no interest in poly per se, only in having this one specific relationship, but yet which is still poly by definition. Still, it goes against my grain, and I find myself in the conundrum that I've seen posted in the forums numerous times. One partner wants poly, and the other doesn't, so the partner who doesn't want poly loves his wife and wants to make her happy, but is not happy about it himself, or vice versa in terms of gender roles. He concludes by saying, a little negative feedback for you, Lusty Guy. He says, I will add that I do occasionally find Lusty Guy's comments on the importance of personal happiness seemingly above all else to lean towards the hedonistic, which, it seems to me, play right into the hands of polyamory's critics. It's a philosophical issue, to be certain, but does somewhat grate if one has a more traditional viewpoint about the meaning of love, loyalty, and responsibility. I'm not sure what to say about this.
About what?
Well, about the letter in general. So first of all, Alan, if there's anything we can do to help you on your poly journey, it sounds like you are reluctantly poly and have some concerns about it. If there's anything we can do to help, please let us know. Otherwise, wish you and your wife and her lover all the best.
Yeah, my heart goes out to you, man.
Did you want to respond to his comments about your being too hedonistic?
Well, I don't necessarily feel any great need to, but I think it would be reasonable that someone would expect to hear what I have to say.
You are hedonistic.
Well, it depends on the definition of hedonistic.
Yeah.
If you get back to the classical Greek origins, the hedonists actually avoided extreme pleasures because they knew that they would end. The first Greek philosopher ate very bland foods and suggested that people drink only in moderation and have a reasonable life and avoid extreme pleasures so that you would also avoid the pain of the ending of them. Now, I will say that, I'm happy to own the label hedonist in whatever way you want to do. I do think that pleasure is a very important thing, but I have a pretty expansive definition of pleasure. I don't just consider the immediate physical positive sensation to be pleasure. I consider the pleasure of a fascinating conversation with an intimate loved one to be every bit as important. I consider the pleasure of insight gained after years of meditative work to be a very important one. The family of pleasures for me is huge. And I would also think that most people who listen to me would not quibble that I do often stress the importance of personal happiness, again with an expansive definition of happiness, but equally often stress the importance of personal integrity. Of being true to yourself. Those two lines in my mind are the most common that I give. And I make no apologies for that. If that seems overly hedonistic to somebody who has a more traditional viewpoint about the meaning of love, loyalty, and responsibility, that's fine. I suspect that I will grate on people who have traditional viewpoints along many axes.
You do great on a lot of people.
And that's okay. Really, for myself, I don't have a lot to say. I think that he's largely right. I do think that personal happiness is very important. I think that's a very common philosophy in modern Western culture with my definition of happiness, which most people would probably find Maslow's term of self-actualization a more accurate word than happiness for my meaning, but I use happiness as a shorthand. But in any case, no, I do think that that's important to achieve that state. And I don't think that I'm in the minority in Western culture, but I do think that it's equally important to be true to yourself. And all kinds of things I say are going to give Polly's critics ammunition. It's okay.
That's true. Probably me too. And not to jump to your defense, but I'm going to jump to your defense because I feel like I just as frequently say the criteria for staying in a relationship is, does it make you a better version of yourself? Are you healthy and happy in this relationship? If somebody is long-term unhappy or feeling that they have to sacrifice their personal integrity, who they are, to be in a relationship, I would never recommend they stay either.
No.
So,
no. And this is the situation where the traditional answer is we stay in it for the children. I don't believe that parents who are living in a way that is not true to themselves, that is not maximizing their happiness and integrity, can raise children that are happy.
I would absolutely agree with you. I don't think that staying in a relationship that is unhealthy for you is any type of example for your kids. Would you care to read the next letter, which is from a doctor giving us more information on coming out to your doctor?
I would be happy to, especially giving my guesses on the nature of this letter, or origin, I should say. On coming out to your doctor. First of all, thank you for addressing such an important topic and doing such a great job of it. I thought most of the content was spot on. Thank you. That's the compliment sandwich getting sent. I do, however, have a few fine points to contribute to the discussion. I'll start with my qualifications to have an opinion on the topic. 1, I've been poly for 20 years, including more than a dozen relationships of assorted types. 2, I'm a practicing MD, specifically a family medicine physician. I'm the primary care physician for hundreds of patients and see many others for acute issues. I see patients in clinic and when they are hospitalized as well. I care for patients of all ages for all conditions, and I consult or refer to specialists when needed. I provide gynecological and obstetric care as part of my practice. I treat people of all genders. I provide STI screenings, diagnosis, and treatment of STIs to people routinely and frequently. I have many conversations with patients every week about which STI test to order and why. Now, here's my feedback points. Again, I agree with most of the content of episode 499. These are just footnotes. Point 1. When you, as a patient, ask for STI tests that the doctor might not otherwise order, for example, HSV2, tell them how the results will make a change in your plan and why you are at risk for having this infection. Wrong example. I just want to be tested for everything. I literally have thousands of tests I could order. Ordering everything is really not practical. I need to have a good reason for ordering tests, because diagnostic tests are an important part of the practice of medicine. Ordering unnecessary tests can harm you, both because it increases the chances of a false positive result, and it could also hurt your wallet when you get the lab bill. Please note the number of labs I order for you doesn't affect how much money I make. This is not about that. Also, neither your insurance company nor any other agency is telling me which labs to order for you. I do have a professional responsibility to you and to myself to practice good medicine. Part of that is ordering tests whose results will change the plan, not just ordering every test a patient asks me for. Correct example. I want to be tested for HSV2 because I'm considering starting a new relationship, but my new partner is immunocompromised and wants to know whether I'm a carrier of HSV2 before we become sexually active together. The result will affect what level of safer sex protective barriers she wants to use with me. Also, a partner I had last year was a carrier for HSV2, so I could be a carrier as well, although I have no symptoms. Boom! No more argument. Now you get the test, because the results have the potential to change the plan you are making with your new partner, and your history shows exposure. Okay, so to summarize point 1, when you ask for a test, have a succinct reason to tell your doctor about how it will change the plan and why you're at risk. That's what we want. Point 2. All poly folks should have a primary care physician who they can comfortably come out to, who is well-versed in STI healthcare. Let your primary care doctor decide when your sexual behaviors are relevant to your care, because they may know something that you haven't thought of. Family medicine doctors are great at providing primary care that includes sexual health. Internal medicine doctors, internists, are great at primary care as well, but many of them don't do much gynecological care. OBGYNs do great work, but don't work with body parts other than the female reproductive organs. To illustrate the value of having your own family medicine primary care physician who knows you, Consider the following example. Joe comes in to clinic with a sore throat. Dr. Smith knows he identifies as bisexual and poly and likes to party once in a while, but is otherwise monogamous with his long-term partner. He always uses condoms for PIV and anal sex, but doesn't use a barrier for oral sex. They discussed this a couple of years ago when Joe established care with Dr. Smith, and it usually doesn't come up, but Dr. Smith keeps the knowledge in the back of her head in case it becomes relevant. Joe feels comfortable with Dr. Smith and comes to her for most of his healthcare needs, but lately it's been more about his knee arthritis than anything else. Yeah, that one will get you. When Joe comes in with his sore throat, wondering if it's strep, Dr. Smith asks about recent sexual activity and offers to do a swab for gonorrhea, basically.
Gonococcal pharyngitis.
There you go, gonorrhea in the throat.
Which is why I went, at the sore knee, because that can be a sign of gonorrhea.
At the same time as the strep throat swab. Sure enough, it's gonorrhea in the throat, not strep. A different antibiotic is prescribed and the infection is cured. If Joe had gone to an urgent care and seen a doctor who didn't know him, maybe only the strep swab would have been done, and the infection could have gone untreated. To summarize point 2, have a primary care doctor who you feel comfortable coming out to, and who is also good at screening for, diagnosing, and treating STIs. Family medicine docs can be good at this, but you have to find one that you feel is a good fit for you. Thanks for listening, Anonymous Poly Doctor.
Thank you for writing in with those finer points. It's always nice to have an actual expert on the show, as it were.
Especially one who gives you the keys to the kingdom, right?
Yes.
If you look at the advice that was written in there, if what you want to get is a particular STI test, now you know how. Tell your doctor why you need it, what you'll do differently based on the results, and what it is in your history that makes it relevant.
Very
Ka-ching.
sound advice. Thank you for taking the time to write in. It's time for your Happy Poly Moment of the Week, brought to you by Fubbly Polyamorists everywhere. And this week's Happy Poly Moment is from Jodi, who wrote in to say, I just have to share with you what a wonderful happy poly day I had today. I'm just 6 months into my first poly relationship and it's going really well. Aw, you baby poly.
It's very sweet. I
have a wonderful boyfriend whom I'm very much in love with. Today he took me and my metamour plus her children and my daughter to the Seattle Aquarium. Oh, I still haven't been. And we all had a great time together. My metamour and I have clicked from the beginning and are becoming true friends, and it just felt effortless and natural for us to be all out together. This was my first public poly situation, and it was more than I could have hoped for. At one point while the kids were playing, the three of us sat on a bench with him holding hands with both of us. It was a really lovely moment and a lovely day that validated this poly thing for me in a very nice way. Aww. You and Lusty Guy, she says, have given so much helpful advice and wisdom, and I do think your podcast has helped me get to this point in a healthy way.
Aww.
Thank you for saying so, Jodi. We're so glad that it sounds like you managed to have your first 6 months of poly without tons of drama. So kudos to you. That's awesome.
Very glad to hear you're enjoying it. And really, again, the lion's share of the credit goes to you, Jodi.
Yes.
Bravo.
You did the work. Yay. Now, that being said, if you ever have any questions, comments, or feedback, if you have a happy poly moment to share with us, you can email polyweekly@gmail.com, call 802-505-POLY, or you can contact us, leave a comment on Facebook, facebook.com/polyweekly, or tweet us at polyweekly or at cunningminx. And I think that's it. Are those all the ways to reach us? I think that's most of them.
All the ones that matter.
Well, in that case, I think that wraps it up for this week's show. I will say thank you to everyone for listening. Thanks for writing in. And remember,
it's not all about the sex.
I have no idea what to say next.
See, I do that to women all the time. They're like, well, there was a next line, and then Lusty Guy spoke, and it all went to hell. Now I'll just sit here and fan myself. You're not going to include that. That's not that fun. No, good. Excellent.